Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Rabbi Perlstein. I'm the director of the Chabad Center for Jewish Life here in Salem. This is our fourth event of this nature where we've done some research and brought a Holocaust survivor to Salem to share their story. I don't know how many of you here in the room were here last year when we brought Anne Frank's sister, Eva Schloss, across the hall, and there were 1,300 people, which was quite inspiring for Salem. We thought about using that venue tonight, but there's no air conditioning. So as a raise of hands, how many of you are happy that you're sitting in air conditioning? All right, very good. So just bear with us as people still trickle in. We're trying to get everybody in that we can. We might even have some standing room. So let's try and be welcoming neighbors if there is an empty seat for somebody somewhere. We're about to hear an incredible story. I picked up Jona yesterday from Portland after she finished talking, and I had the opportunity to talk to her all the way down from Portland, took her out for an interview today on the radio, continued to talk to her. She has more stories than we have the time to sit and listen to, but we're going to hear an incredible, incredible story of perseverance, of survival, and a unique one. A unique one because out of the 3,000 children that were known as the Mengele twins, only 200 survived. Most of them were quite young and could not survive the experiments that were done on them. Jona and her sister Miriam were only 13, yet that was old enough to be able to withstand some of the horrific things that were done to her. And she's here today. Of those 200 survivors, I can't tell you how many are still alive today, but not that many. We're going to hear a story of where humanity has done, unfortunately, the worst to other human beings in the name of science, in the name of technology. I think all of us here in the room is willing to also stand and say that as much as we're going to hear a story of what took place about humanity's worst times, we're willing to commit that by hearing this story, we will make sure and do everything in our power that science, technology, and the arts of any kind are never used to hurt another human being. The world was created, from my humble opinion and from Jewish standpoint, to make this world a dwelling place for the divine, not the opposite, God forbid. So when we listen to this story today, we have to recommit ourselves to radical love, acceptance of another human being, no matter where they come from, no matter how they believe, no matter what their political opinion is, and I know that that can be hard today, but we try. You didn't come here to hear me talk, so I'm not going to take up that much more time today, but I do want to say that Chabad, our organization, has been quoted a number of times as being set up by the Rebbe. If Hitler and the Nazis searched for every single Jew and hunted us down out of hate, our mission statement, if you can sum it up, would pretty much be to search and find every Jew out of radical love. Whether we're Jewish or not, if we are all human beings, the Torah, Judaism teaches us that within every single human being is an aspect of God. As it says in the Bible, humans, man, the human being was created in the image of God. If there is nothing you can find positive about another person, at the very least, reach out to that divine aspect that they were created in and that you yourself resemble as well. There's so much that we have in common that we absolutely need to do our best to connect on as human beings. I think as we hear the story today, we need to take home this lesson as best as we possibly can. Without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome Jona Laks.
Good evening, everyone. I'm most pleased to see this lovely audience. My heart is spreading. And I'm thankful to you for coming and wanting to listen and to know about what happened during World War II under the German regime. I also want to thank to the Chabad Center for inviting me to give me this opportunity to be with you tonight. So be blessed and thank you for coming. My name is Jona Laks. I was born in Poland, in this city by the name Łódź. The Germans, when they invaded Poland, they changed its name to Litzmannstadt. It was September 1 when my family and me, returned from summer vacation to get into town to start schooling for that year. Already on the way, we saw the defeated Polish army. And then we understood that there is a war. Arriving to the city, entering our homes, we immediately heard on the radio new instructions being opposed, especially to the Jewish community, to the Jewish people. Their first demand was that all the Jews had to wear a yellow badge. The yellow badge, which represents the Jewish nation, on the front and at the back of our clothes. We were not permitted to be on street later than 5:00 p.m. We were also not permitted to enter schools or any kind of education possible. Quite sooner, there were also signs on all social places like coffee house, theaters, cinemas, and so forth, saying, Jews and dogs are not permitted to enter. Life became hard, cruel, dangerous. And so one by one, not much later, there was a restriction, a command that all the Jewish people should leave their houses, their possessions, and go to this section of the ghetto. The ghetto was obviously erected at the oldest section of the town. Shabby, dirty, And so the Jews left their homes, doors open, all the belongings behind, and entered the ghetto. Ghetto Lodge was one of the longest lasting ghettos in Poland. That owing to the fact that the inmates of the ghetto were productive, we had to produce to all the German necessities for life, for their, how should I say, operating and so forth. People were forced to give labor, and this was the only way to survive in the ghetto, because by that we would get a card, a working card, and only those working people were entitled to a daily daily portion of food, which meant a slice of bread, a coffee, and sometimes a little vegetable. The ghetto was very quickly overcrowded, since the Germans would locate or bring about the Jews from the entire vicinities all into Ghetto Lodge. And it became one of the biggest ghettos on the Polish soul. Owing to the very difficult, hard conditions in the ghetto, many illnesses came about. The Germans, at a certain stage, were afraid that those epidemic illnesses might come to town. That means to the other population in the town. In 1940 and 1941, there was in Berlin a conference at which it was decided there about the solution of the Jewish people, which meant to wipe out all the European Jewry. And quite soon after, they decided to send transports to camps, to exterminating camps to lose the population in the ghettos. And so the first extermination camp was erected at Chelmno. At that time, there were no crematoriums yet known or operated. And so to Chelmno, the prisoners who had been brought there were killed in gas vents. There was gas in the vents, and the people heading to Chelmno found their deaths while on the way to Chelmno. They were obviously afterwards brought to Chelmno itself, and there were mass graves, mainly not to let the outer world to know what was happening in Chelmno. And so the ghettos were liquidated slowly by sending the people to Chelmno. When Chelmno became too busy, the next camp the people were sent to was to Auschwitz. And with one of those transports, I myself, with my twin, Miriam, and my elder sister, Hannah, was sent by such a transport to Auschwitz. Arriving to Auschwitz, we had to go through an appeal. And Mengele would come out and choose the people he wanted for forced labor and those he wanted to exterminate immediately. And so it meant just pointed out with a cane, said left, right, left, right. My sister Hannah, who was also a young girl, about 4 or 5 years older than us, feared that we would not make, or we would not go through this selection, since after so many years in the ghetto of starvation, hard conditions, undeveloped, she feared I would not make it. She pushed me to the back row, turned around, and pinched my cheeks to make me look healthier. Then she took off her wooden shoes and she pushed them under my feet to make me look taller. But eventually that did not help. I was sent to the left, which meant to the crematorium. Useless person. Whereas my elder sister and twin Miriam were sent to the right. Hannah, my elder sister, was very courageous. She bent down and she begged, crying out, that Miriam and Jona, at that time a different name, are twins. And as such, we have never before been divided, separated. She did not know who was Mengele and what were his desires. I, in the meantime, walked up with the other group towards the crematorium. we were forced to run quickly. And as closer I got to the crematorium, I could see the fire, the sparkles coming out of the chimney. I could also feel the burnt flesh. Only then I realized that I'm being sent to the crematorium. Up there, when Mengele heard that I am a twin to Miriam, he ordered an SS officer to run along and bring me back to the rank to go into the camp. And so we were united, Miriam and I. But all the rest of the group, that part, this portion of the people who were entitled to enter the camp, had undergone a special procedure, like shaving hair, disinfections, and tattooing. And they were already sent or entered the camp of Auschwitz. So when I came back, I was just me and the Germans around me. And my hair at that time had not been shaved. But the only thing they demanded was to make me tattoo it, because it wasn't possible to enter the camp without having the number. Since we had no names by that time, we were just numbers. So yes, I got a number, and I entered Auschwitz, Birkenau, joined my sisters, Miriam and Hannah, and was momentarily happy. Very soon, they took away Hannah. They sent her to a forced labor camp in Germany. Whereas Mengele sent to pick up the 2 guinea pigs for his notorious experiments which he performed. And so we were among the twins. And as the rabbi said before, we were about 3,000 twins. That means 1,500 couples. Mengele was also interested in a family, Jewish family, from Hungary, dwarfs. There were 2 parents, 7 children, all dwarfs. And he would collect all of us, them as well, to Auschwitz, to main Auschwitz. Auschwitz had many camps, sort of, where the experiments have been practiced. And that happened every second day, which means 3 times a week. We were collected, all the twins, including that family, and we were brought to be experimented. We were brought by lorries, trucks, and it was high and difficult to climb up. And it was especially difficult for the droves, since they have such short legs. The Germans would bring each time groups of German soldiers for recreation, to see the scenery, to see how the people climb the trucks. On occasions, I couldn't stand it. I stretched out my hands to the dwarfs and told them to step, and I would push them up. Me, having been, thank you, having been myself so young and not at all strong. The Allied armies approached, got closer to Auschwitz as well. And then a German SS officer came out on the street and announced that everyone must go down and leave Auschwitz, since the Allies plan to bomb Auschwitz. And so everyone, anyone who could just walk, left then Auschwitz. And that walking out of Auschwitz, that march was called the Death March. Most of the people could not advance as quickly as they wanted to. It was January, a very severe winter. The snow was up to the belly, I would say. But the white snow would eventually get a red color. Anybody who could not follow was shot on the spot. The white snow had red blood all along. Until those who were lucky and made it arrived to the German border, had been again transferred to other camps in Germany. At the Wannsee Conference in Berlin, it was decided that not one prisoner is to fall into the Allied hands. So their intention was to get all of the prisoners out of the region, deep into Germany. And only then, actually, in Germany, new camps were erected. The first camp I reached in Germany was called Ravensbrück. But Ravensbrück was filled up very soon again because of bringing over all the camp's inmates from Poland. And so they sent and erected new camps. So my next camp was Malchow. Malchow was a new camp. It had no medical equipment. Actually, the prisoners themselves built up the camp. There is a little story. I need to go back a weeny bit. When leaving Auschwitz, the inmates of Auschwitz grabbed from these storages whatever came into their hands. Miriam and I, we were weak, small, and decided we would not be able to carry anything along. Yet Miriam got into a storage room of medicines and got hold of a little bottle. And so she took that little bottle with her and she kept it all the way. When we arrived in Malchow, I have been very, very sick. Actually, they threw me on the pile of the dead prisoners. Miriam came up and she said that she saw me speaking. They eventually removed me from there and brought me into a room. Miriam would come every day to see whether I am still alive. And they would send her away. They said, she's dying, we have no medicine, and we cannot help her. And then Miriam remembered about that little bottle she took at Auschwitz, in Auschwitz, while leaving. And she brought it over. And eventually, that bottle really helped me. The bottle was actually quinine, of which we did not understand for what purpose it is used. But as it happened, this is the medicine that helped me to survive. It didn't take much time, and the allies, the three of them, the American, British, the Russian on the other side, they all got closer. And the Germans decided, as it was said, not to let any prisoner to fall into the Allied hands. They took out the last camp we're at, took us out again to a death march. And that time to bring us to the Baltic Sea to be drowned. We weren't aware, since the Germans would lock us up every evening closed the doors, nailed the doors so that nobody can escape till the morning when we would start marching again. One night, the last nights, all the nights actually, we could hear the bombings. We could hear that war was going on. And we weren't afraid. We were glad, actually. We thought, finally, there is something happening. Maybe we shall be released. And so one night, when it became so quiet, we decided to break open the doors. And we walked out, and we saw the German soldiers fleeing. They took off their uniforms, threw away. They threw away their weapons, and they were fleeing. And so, at that moment, we realized that we are free. But yet, that section, that part of the country was not freed yet. Nevertheless, the first thing the survivors did was to try to get some food. Probably at that time, there were no refrigerators yet. And the German people would store mainly the vegetables outside their houses on pits and would cover them by snow. And so people, having been so hungry, befell, grabbed with their hands, took out whatever they came across, raw potatoes, raw vegetable, and started eating. And they ate. And they ate endlessly. But unfortunately, the people could not digest the sudden food they got into their stomachs. And at that time, very, very many people died. Eventually, I'll make it short because I was requested to make the things short. We formed, being left alone without the Germans, we formed sort of groups. And with our column walking along, there were a few girls, more or less my age, more or less. But some of them simply did not remember their home addresses, and they didn't know where to return to. And really, after 2 days, the mayor of that town came out and announced that anybody who was not a German citizen should leave Germany and go to his country. And so people formed a row, and started walking out the town. Truly, I don't know how we knew where to go. Obviously, we had no money and there was no transportation. And so we just walked after all the other prisoners. And there were lines of people all leaving Germany to their countries. We eventually reached Poland and reached Łódź, where I was born by. And many generations lived there. We arrived owing to the fact that the other girls did not remember their home addresses and did not know how to get to their homes. I offered them and told them to come with us, since I remembered my home address. And we had a big apartment. And so we were together, 11 at first, and 9 girls. And we kept together all the time. And we arrived to Łódź. But at that time, in Łódź, there was no official Jewish institute yet to help out the prisoners, the ex-prisoners, the survivors. And everyone had to be on his own. Again, without money, with the clothes we used to have in the camps. And then tried to get into a home, wherever. The 9 girls of us decided the coming days to get to the address I had remembered, Chelmno 38. I walked up the door, rang the bell, wanted to enter. Nobody answered. I rang again, and there was no answer. And then, for the 3rd time, I rang very strongly. And then somebody got to the, shouted out and said, "You hooligans, what do you want?" And I, being very naive, said simply, "I lived here," and told them exactly the number of our apartment. She put down the phone, and I had nobody to talk to. But nevertheless, we didn't have another option or another place to go to. So I walked up again and called and rang again. And at that time, nobody answered. But in a minute, the woman came down, opened the door, looked at me, And she pointed at me and she said, "You remained alive?" I was stoned. I was frightened. I didn't know what to do. We ran away. And we never came back. And so we became again homeless people. And we walked the streets up and down. And we are speaking between us. And then suddenly somebody turns around, a woman, and she says, "Marysia, Tosia," those were our Polish names. It happened that she had been our teacher before the war. And when she heard our story, she came up with a proposition. She said she has a cellar on the street Żeromskiego 11. I still remember. If you want to, stay here, don't move. I'll run along and bring the keys. But then they said, it is a neglected cellar, filthy, no furniture. But we obviously said, nevertheless, we are interested in it. And so she ran home, brought us the key to that cellar, and we entered the cellar, being happy to have a roof over our heads. Many people were returning then from the camps. And every day at 5:00 p.m., a train would come back to Łódź with survivors from the camps. And all the Jews then who were in Łódź used to run to the train at 5:00 to find out if anybody from their families were returning home. And so we did every day. And we're always sad to come back having no results, finding nobody from the family coming back. And as we were returning from the train, being sad, a man passed out and said, "Have you seen Hanka?" We said, "No." He said, "I saw her." But we said, "We haven't seen her." And so he rushed quickly to the train to stop the train for going back, returning. The Polish police came along. They jumped on the train and started searching if anybody is hiding. And they found one door which was closed and they could not open. But prior to their leaving the train, they said they must open that door. And the Polish soldiers opened that door. And there stood Hanka, our sister, crying and begging not to make a step off the train, saying that nobody from her family is yet alive, and she does not want to live in Łódź. As we all saw what was happening, the Polish army was coming, and everybody wanted to know what is really happening. So we too ran back to see for ourselves what is actually happening. And we got to that wagon where Hannah was. Most of the policemen were there. And when Hannah saw Miriam and me, she then permitted to be taken off the train. But I need to explain something, how it came about. As I said, when evacuating Auschwitz, or even before, Hannah had been sent to a forced labor camp, whereas we had been brought to Mengele for his experiments. Since then, we did not see Hannah anymore. Hannah's camp in Germany was liberated earlier, about April time. And immediately as she was liberated, she began searching, looking for the two twins, Miriam and Jona. She referred to the Red Cross. She referred to the Red Army and to the Americans and to whomever she could approach, and she begged them to find out where the two twins are. And she got no positive reply. So she was sure that we were dead, that Mengele killed us. So then she decided she's not going to go back to Łódź since nobody from her family survived. So when Hannah was liberated, she crossed the border, German, Poland, and in Szczecin, a town, Polish town, she got a job in a hospital. At that time, there was a Polish injured soldier who was a prisoner for the Germans. And he had begged and demanded to be brought to Łódź. He wants to see his parents before he dies. The manager of the hospital referred to Hannah, saying that she knows Polish and she comes from Łódź, and that he demands to escort this sick soldier to Łódź. And she refused. She said she does not want to go back to Łódź. But eventually, she was very good-hearted. So she came up with a request that she is ready to escort that Polish injured soldier to Łódź, only under the condition that she will not step off, she will not remain in Łódź, she will come back to the hospital in Szczecin and it was granted to her. But since she saw us in Łódź, waiting to see who is arriving, she obviously stepped or agreed to leave the train and join us. So yes, then we, the three, were joined. We had planned to start life and to bring to a normal. But unfortunately, in 1946, there was a pogrom in Chelmno. Has anybody heard of? At that pogrom, the Poles killed 42 survivors who just came from the camps for the reason because they did not want to return their homes to the people coming back from the camps. And so it became very dangerous to remain in Poland. And at that time, almost all the Jews who returned to Poland left Poland again. I shall maybe turn a wee bit back and tell a little story to soften the situation. I'm going to tell a little story that happened to me at Auschwitz. Owing to the fact that I was not meant to enter the camp, but to go to the crematorium for extermination. My hair was not shaved, and I didn't go through the procedure for entering into the camp, like disinfection, shaving of hair, giving away the clothes, the only clothes we had, and being tattooed. And as I told you before, when I returned, all the others, they were meant to enter the camp, had already gone through that procedure. And so I was left unshaved, and my hair was left on me. The only thing they had to do was to give me a number to be tattooed, because it was not possible to enter the camp without being tattooed. And so I got a number. Every morning, as it is probably practice in all the prisons, all the inmates of Auschwitz had to come out and be counted. The Germans wanted to know if and how many inmates, Auschwitz inmates, escaped, ran away. And they called it an appeal. And that happened every day. And it would take hours to be counted until they got their reply. Now, we, Miriam and I, in Auschwitz, were put into a hospital, a barrack hospital, and the barracks in Auschwitz were rows of barracks divided, men, women, with the dividing the electrical fences. Many prisoners found that deaths when they could not bear the conditions in the camp, and they threw themselves on those iron fences. Many found their death. At the men camp, there was a boy, a Hungarian boy. As you all know, war in Hungary started much later than in Poland. I believe it was in 1942. That boy had lived with his parents, was well-bred, nicely grown, and happened to have had also blue eyes. That was exactly what the Germans strived. They wanted all their people to be blue-eyed and blonde. And so Mengele took that boy as a servant. And being a servant, he could hear what the soldiers spoke about. But at the time of counting the prisoners, he too had to come out. And he noticed me, and probably I looked a bit better than the others, owing to the fact that my hair was not shaved. And from that day onwards, each time he came out, he would look for me. At certain occasions, he even threw me a piece of bread, because his conditions were better than the usual one. And so everybody around actually knew that Jona had a boyfriend, which was very odd, except for me. I didn't know. I had no thoughts about it. But when we came out of Auschwitz for the death march, he too obviously had to leave the camp. And so people referred to me and asked me, "Have you seen your boyfriend?" And I was too well. I said no. And actually, I have not seen him since, hence. Living in Israel, one day there came an American producer by the name Dr. Josef Mengele. He's from New York. And he referred to our government and said he wants to make a documentary especially on the twins. I had been chosen to take part in this documentary. And I had long forgotten what is happening with that documentary. And one day, I get a phone call from New York saying, I'm Dr. Kucheva, and I want to tell you something. Something very ordinary happened today. I wondered, what happened? And he said, while I was showing the documentary I filmed, and I showed your appearance over there, in the dark, a young man jumped up and said, I'm Jona's boyfriend. And so, yes, he brought him to the phone. We were connected. I had also brought him to Israel. I introduced him to the government, a very warm Jew. And I think it's very unusual that such a thing really happened in the camps, mainly because of the reason that people were not talking, who were not permitted to talk one to another. Is it too prolonged?
You have to ask them if they want more.
Should I?
Can I ask you a few questions?
Right.
Okay. So, everyone has a little more time? Okay. You feeling okay?
Yeah.
Okay. So, I want to just ask a few questions, about your story, so you can share a little bit more, but then also a few other about the way you lived your life afterwards. So let's start with, your mother passed away before the war, as it was starting.
Starting the war?
Because of a heart attack, right?
No, because of the war.
Well, yes.
As a
She couldn't handle
result.
what was going on.
As a result.
As a result of what was going on,
Right.
she passed away. So you moved into the Łódź ghetto with your rest of your family, your father and how many siblings?
Yes, we were 6 sisters,
Six
2 boys.
sisters, right? So you shared that your father and your 3 sisters ended up going to Chelmno, and never coming back because it was an
Right.
extermination camp. Why were you not chosen then? Could you share that?
Why?
Why were you not there then and chosen to go as well? Where were you at that time that they were chosen to go to the extermination camp?
In Chelmno?
Yeah. So back in Łódź,
Uh-huh.
what did your father do? Can you share that story?
Did I not mention?
I don't think so. Did she mention that? No, so go ahead.
When the Germans came up for the first time and they wanted to evacuate the ghettos and to bring the people or to send the people to extermination camps, the procedure was that a German soldier would announce that all the citizens, of course there were all Jews there in the ghetto, that all the citizens have to walk down on the street, and there would be a selection. My father really feared that we, the two, were so young, so slim, so skinny, would not be permitted to remain alive. He put us, the two of us, on a cupboard, pushed us to the end, to the wall, and he covered the front of the the front of us with bottles. And he went down to that appeal. And they were taken for extermination to Chelmno. And I and Miriam were saved at this instant.
And Hannah was there as well?
Pardon?
Where was your sister Hannah at the time? She went down for selection as well?
I didn't quite understand.
Where was your sister Hannah then?
At that time?
Yeah.
She's gone through.
She went down to
She
selection.
didn't went downstairs. She gone through. She was
strong.
she was older than us. Yes, she was bigger.
It may not be something you want to talk about, so you can tell me you don't want to. But do you have any memories of when you arrived? What did Mengele? How did he introduce himself? How did he make himself welcome to the children? Did you have any personal interactions with him?
Mengele had many collaborators. He had many doctors, prisoners, chosen on various occasions. He didn't need to introduce himself while coming in. Everybody was so obedient. Everybody stood up, and it was obvious that somebody very important is arriving. We have to respect him. So he didn't say hello. No. But I truly now remember, on one occasion, I got a piece of chocolate from him, and that's true. And the reason was because I was crying, and once he started to operate on me, I stopped crying. And so he said, "You are a good girl." And he gave me a piece of chocolate. This was the only occasion. He didn't have to introduce himself. Everybody knew who Mengele was at Auschwitz.
And just to be sure, so that people understand, the way the twin experiments worked, he experimented on one twin, and the other one was left in full health, right?
He would experiment one twin, whereas the other twin was meant to be the control of that. But once one of the twins died as a result of the experiments, he would instantly order to murder the other twin so that he could have the pair of twins for his experiments. I must mention something, really. The details or the outcome of Mengele's research was sent to a research company well known before the war, Kaiser Wilhelm Institute. And Mengele would get paid for the experiments he performed. I have the documentation, and it's a fact. Yet he would not leave or permit or enabled, actually, nobody in the world to get to know what his experiments were and to what were the outcomes he reached, what he understood from, so that the world really did not benefit for the world population. concerning the experiments Mengele had performed. Mengele just took permitted himself to perform those experiments on women, men, and children.
With no outcome. So you eventually made your way to Israel, and you dedicated your life to running an organization. You want to share a little bit about what you did over the past?
Which one do you like? The Moshe and Tibi?
Which one? See, there are now the one specifically for twin survivors.
Now, which of the stories would you like me to tell?
Which story? You choose the best one.
I don't know. I really don't know. Yes, I became the head of the Mengele Twins organization. But I want to tell you something. Prior to becoming that, I need to go back to it. A Polish doctor collaborated to the German people, was tried. There was a trial. It was the first trial in Europe. He was found guilty, and his penalty was just £1. The entire Europe communities were shocked about the verdict. A killer, a mass killer, and was found guilty and was fined just by £1. And so the French television, it was the second channel, educational channel, decided to make a gathering and discuss this matter. And I have been sent on behalf of the Israeli government to participate. And intellectuals from all over the world on each aspect, from each field, came together to discuss this matter. It was in 1985 in Paris, and I used this occasion to mention for the first time about the Mengele twins and the experiments they had to undergo. I became really the head of this organization worldwide. And a British TV station approached me requesting to gather a few twins, saying that they want to film and make a documentary about the Mengele twins. And so I helped them out, and I organized with whatever they needed. I gave them a number of people to participate in that filming. In that filming, there was a man by the name, he's still alive, by the name of Moshe. Moshe was also an identical twin. He had a brother. But when we left Auschwitz, he got lost. They never got together. And Moshe was convinced that his brother is not living anymore. And Moshe married in Israel. And he has 5 children, 4 daughters, 1 son. And he told them all that their uncle is not alive, that he was exterminated under the twins' experiments. And all his family knew that this is the fact. At some time, the Russian TV reached the BBC, the British one, with a request to buy that video, that documentary film for their TV. And it was shown on their TV, in Russia, in Moscow, far away from there. An old man was sitting home, watching the television, and he saw a picture which he said it was him, and became furious. And he said, how comes that the television made use of his picture without having consulted with him? His daughter-in-law came home, and she saw how very upset that man was. She said, "Leave it. I'll go to Moscow. I'll find out what is happening, how it came about." And there she found out that there is a man by the name of TB, and that it is possible that TB has a brother in Israel. And so all the TVs, the British, the Russian, and of course in Israel, were very excited about it. And I was requested to go and find out, or to tell to Moshe, the Israeli twin, that it is possible that his brother is alive. And his family would not permit me to do so. They said that Moshe has a weak heart. He will not be able to absorb, to congest the news that he has a brother, a living brother. But I've been constantly reminded to try to speak to them and to bring the news to the family at least. And so I engaged his favorite son, his favorite child, the son. And I told him, we have to bring to Moshe's attention that it is possible that there is a brother living somewhere abroad. It wasn't easy. We got through to him. And eventually, I came up to him and told him about his brother, Tibi. The 2 brothers were got connection by phone from Russia. to Israel and spoke to each other. And eventually, they also met. I was very happy that I had a part of doing and enabling to meet the two brothers. I must say, it is the fate of the Jewish people to have been separated one from another due to the constellation of all the German pogroms. And yes, I feel that up to date, there is still much to do. And this can be done by actually to speak about the Shoah, to remember and to pass over to new generations. Because actually, this is a chapter of the most darkest days on earth throughout the history and should not be forgotten. It must be talked about and remembered and reminded.
One more question? Because that was a good finish.
You want to?
One more question. This is not about the stories. A lot of people in the room here probably want to know, after everything you've shared, witnessed, and saw, none of us could ever imagine the horrors that you've experienced. Yet you picked yourself up, you moved to a country that wasn't even a country yet, you built organizations to help others, you are now traveling thousands of miles around the country. This is your 5th talk in the United States so far in the past week and a half, 2 weeks. How do you do this? How do you go through and see the worst of humanity and still believe in everybody in this room?
Definitely.
How?
It's not easy to answer. Really. And honestly speaking, I really don't understand myself, but I remember that still being a prisoner at camp, I said to myself, if I survive, I will definitely try to tell the world what happened. And so, having said to myself, I really did it. I arrived to Israel illegally because the British had not yet permitted the Jewish people to go back to the homeland. I was lucky. Our ship was supposed to have been sent back to Cyprus. But somehow, I don't know how the management of the ship, it worked out, and eventually we reached Israel. I married a man, an ex-prisoner as well, a survivor. And we had 3 children. And I deeply felt that actually we did not give up. We're building a new generation, and we want to pass those things to next generations. And so I really dedicated, and I'm still dedicating in this connection. Does it answer?
So I just want to reiterate so everyone here understands, specifically because I appreciate so much what you're doing. Jona, you're 89 years young, right?
Yes.
May you have a long life and
Thank
a
you.
lot of strength to continue what you're
Thank
doing.
you.
But also, English is not your first language, right?
It's not my mother language, no,
At all, right? You speak Hebrew better than you speak English.
definitely.
You speak Romanian, Polish?
No, Polish.
Polish better than you speak English. So English is like 3 or 4 down, yeah. And nonetheless, you gave an hour and a half speech in English. Many don't know that Miriam and you
Passed
lived
away
together for a very long time. How long ago did she pass away?
3 weeks ago,
3 weeks ago.
unfortunately.
Yeah. This was after the speech was already planned, and we called Jona to be Menachem Avel.
And you know,
And you said?
I went to her bed and wanted to tell her about me meeting that audience, but she couldn't hear anymore, unfortunately.
Yeah. So we called her because Jews sit Shiva for 7 days, and we called you to find out if you're willing to still come. And it was a firm yes. Nothing was going to slow you down. So with everything you carry with you, and with all the limitations that you should say no, we absolutely are so incredibly appreciative of your grace, of your time, and of you sharing something that must be very hard to relive every time. Yasher koach.
Toda.
We want to give this.
I'm pleased to meet you.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Melissa. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for coming. I'm very proud of you. And I'm pleased to meet you. And I must say, really, honestly speaking, my heart is melting to see such a beautiful, big audience. Be blessed.